say your name? Welcome. Good morning to you who are here with us and those of you who are joining us virtually. We welcome you to today's service. I'm John Murphy. I'm serving as your worship associate today. If you're visiting this morning, we're glad to have you. We invite you to bring your whole self with you to the service this morning. In a few moments, we'll sort of open our service with reading of the covenant and chalice lighting. We do this to remind us of our promise to live into our covenant and to put love into action and to live out the community of love and justice that we aim to be. As today's sermon, I must say I'm as intrigued as you are about see how Reverend Joel will unravel the provocative subject of useful conflict. So again, welcome. Let us worship together.
I'm the interim minister here at All Souls. So glad to welcome you all this morning. It's feeling like spring, and I know, isn't it great? I mean, I'm almost going to be too hot in this today. I'm just really enjoying that. So I've been thinking about a little more about conflict, partly because we talked a little about that on April 10th. You had your announcement of your ministerial candidate, and I offered you some advice. One piece of advice was going to take more than a couple lines in a sermon. It was going to take a sermon by itself. So that's today, and it's on conflict. And there's plenty of conflict in the world and in life in general, so where to start? This is where I start when I think about conflict, because I want my conflict to be useful. But before I can even get there, how can I have my heart set on approaching the world and life as a Unitarian Universalist that allows that possibility? And so I have a story that I want to tell you as we open the service. It's the Rabbi's Gift is the name of the story. There was a monastery once, and there were only 5 monks left in the monastery. It had once been a large monastery filled with monks and nuns and scholars, all studying and thinking and practicing. But over the years, there'd been some conflicts, there'd been some fights. Monastery had just shrunk to the five monks, the abbot, the head monk, and the other monks. There was a rabbi's retreat hut, not too far away from the monastery. They really didn't know each other well, but they'd had some interactions over the many years, and one day the abbot heard that the monk was in the hut and studying, and the monk had been concerned about the monastery shrinking and said, I'm going to go ask that rabbi for some advice. I hear that she can give some pretty good advice. So the abbot went down to the rabbi's hut and knocked on the door, and the rabbi was so pleased to see the abbot and welcomed her in, and they sat together and had tea and talked all day long. The abbot shared with the rabbi how worried she was that the monastery was shrinking and didn't look like it might even stay open. And after they had talked, the abbot said, do you have any last bit of advice for me? And the rabbi said, I told you everything I can think of. I know it's not much, but I do know this. The Messiah is among you. Well, the abbot was a little confused. She didn't really quite know why the rabbi would say that. They hugged goodbye. It had been a good day, and the abbot went back to the monastery, and she thought about that. She said, well, the Messiah? I mean, that's That's a big deal. Messiah? Well, could it be Brother Robert? I mean, he has got to be the crankiest person in the world. What if it is Brother Robert? What if it's Sister Julia? She's so sweet, and she's so kind, and she's so clumsy. Could it be Brother Michael? He's so faithful, and he's so quiet. He never says anything. It'd be kind of hard for him to be a Messiah. Then at the next community meeting, the abbot shared her conversation with the rabbi and said, "We didn't come up with any big solutions, but the rabbi said that one of us is the Messiah." And the monks' eyes got really large. They looked at the abbot like, "Are you kidding? The rabbi said that about us?" An amazing thing happened, though, in the next year. They started treating one another like one of them might be the Messiah, but they didn't know who it was, so they had to treat all of each other well, and they did. There was nothing suddenly changed, but things did change. The monastery was in a beautiful park, and travelers would often come through to see the beauty of the park, and they noticed this monastery where the monks treated each other with such love and such respect, and soon there were applicants and new monks, and the monastery grew. And they realized maybe one of the new monks is the Messiah. Nobody was ever really quite sure who it might be. But the monastery grew and flourished. I invite you now into worship. Let us call each other into life and into love by seeing in each other the power of our lives and the power of seeing the lives in others. Welcome to worship.
Kennedy. This morning we welcome Lily and Savvy Kennedy to light our chalice.
Well, I got so excited about telling the story, I forgot to do the announcements, so. And I didn't want to miss announcements this morning, in part because we have connection cards. If you're new, you're visiting. Actually, if you've been here for 50 years, but you want to say something to me, and maybe we'll want to go get coffee, or just let us know something, fill out a connection card, leave it in the offertory basket. We're really glad to hear from you. We're really glad to hear from our folks who are watching the live stream. We have ways for you to connect as well. And you can always call the church or email. Just because you're on Zoom doesn't mean I wouldn't have coffee with you. This afternoon, after the service, is a time to hang out with Reverend Katie, your ministerial candidate. I believe Nasreen will be up in the makerspace. Yes, so that's in the RE wing on the second floor. So if you'd like to have some hangout time with your ministerial candidate, we've got time this afternoon. Stay in, have some coffee, and join us. And speaking of ministerial candidates, we have a special announcement from the chair of the Ministerial Search Committee, Annie Rahill.
Good morning. I'm Annie Rahill, and I'm chair of your Ministerial Search Committee. The committee, together with our ministerial candidate, Reverend Katie Romano Griffin, has been busy planning Candidating Week, and I'm here to give you an update. Candidating Week starts 2 weeks from today and runs from Sunday, May 8th to Sunday, May 15th. It starts with Reverend Katie being in the pulpit on Mother's Day, May 8th. The following week, the Ministerial Search Committee is hosting many different meetings to give everyone an opportunity to meet with Reverend Katie. Many of you will already have received an invitation from a member of our committee to attend one of these meetings. If you're new to the church or are not in any obvious subgroups right now, post-COVID, please attend a cottage meeting. There are 2 scheduled right now. Monday, May 9th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. via Zoom, and Tuesday, May 10th, 2:30 to 4 p.m. in person here at church. Everyone is welcome to the cottage meetings. Please RSVP Jenny Yumibi. Her email is in the order of service if you would like to attend either one. Now, if you would like to meet Reverend Katie, but the cottage meetings don't work for you, and maybe you were invited to another meeting or 2 and they don't work for you, please let me know. Reverend Katie wants to meet each one of you, so we will find a time when you and Reverend Katie can meet if you cannot make the meetings. Childcare is available for the cottage meetings and all other subgroup meetings. Just let us know that you need it. If you were invited to a subgroup meeting, please let the MSC member who invited you know. If you're coming to a cottage meeting, please let Jenny Yumibi know when you let her know that you'll be attending. At the tail end of the week, on Saturday, May 14th, from 6 to 8 p.m., we're having a congregational pitch-in in Harris Hall with Reverend Katie and her husband, Sean. Everyone is welcome. No RSVP necessary for that one. If you would like to volunteer to help run the pitch-in, please contact Judy Lumbert, and her email is also in the order of service. Then don't forget, on the last day of Candidating Week, Sunday, May 15th, Reverend Katie will again be in the pulpit, and after that, there will be a congregational meeting where we'll vote on whether to call her as our next settled minister. In the meantime, I hope you're enjoying Reverend Katie's video messages. I understand this week she's going to answer a question about her dog. Stay tuned. Please plan to attend at least one event over Candidating Week to meet Reverend Katie in person so that your vote on May 15th can be an informed one. In the meantime, if you have any questions about anything to do with Candidating Week, please reach out to any one of us on the search committee. We're here to help. Thank you.
So we Unitarian Universalists it was about 10 years ago, we kind of had a big fight, movement-wide. Might have been a little longer than that ago. Maybe it was 18 years ago, but we had a big fight. So what happened? How do we get into this fight? So there was a speech that one of our theological school professors gave at one of our national meetings, our annual national meeting. We call it the General Assembly, and he spoke about the need for a language of reverence. That didn't appear to be especially big conflict at the General Assembly, but then the next winter, the president of our National Association spoke at a congregation in Texas about Professor Bumbaugh's article saying he talked about a language of reverence and how important that would be in helping us come together and understand one another. And then a local newspaper picked up the speech that our president had given in Texas and said that Unitarian Universalists were going to get a whole new language, religious language, and that everybody was going to have to use that language. And that caused a big fight because some people thought that the report in the newspaper was accurate about what our president had said, which he didn't say that actually at all. But the fight started, and suddenly folks were saying, if we have this language, that leaves me out. And if we use that language, somebody said, then that leaves me out. How can we say there's going to be one true language? And others were saying, sometimes I feel like I'm never sure what word we're supposed to use. Can we just choose some word so at least we can have a conversation? People were getting really angry about it. And some of the folks who are getting really angry about it were folks who were humanists. And Unitarian Universalist humanists are folks who tend not to believe in God, usually, often. And often really don't have other places to go. Often it's the Unitarian Universalist congregation in town that's the most welcoming place for humanist folks. So some humanist folks are really feeling left out about this call for a language of reverence, words of reverence. Were we supposed to be now saying God in the service every Sunday? It was interesting to me that as folks kept saying how they felt, they weren't listening. And it became pretty clear that they weren't listening because if they had actually gone and read what Professor Bumbaugh had written, Professor Bumbaugh had written it from the perspective of a Unitarian Universalist humanist. In fact, taught humanism and humanist philosophy at our theological school. So it was kind of confusing to me. I remember hearing about all this conflict and thinking, wait a minute, but this is about Professor Bumbaugh's idea. Wow. One of the things that changed the whole conversation was when we just stopped and listened. And actually, that's one of the things I found in interim ministry. When I come into congregations, every congregation has its disagreements, it's some conflicts that never get resolved. The congregation I grew up in finally resolved a conflict about an organ, but it took them about 70 years. Should we get one? Should we not get one? And the most interesting and most powerful way to resolve it, or if even not to resolve it, to learn to live with it, was just listen, to hear the stories. Perhaps to wonder, is one of us here today the Messiah? Even if we don't believe there's a real Messiah. One of the great opportunities and great privileges, too, is sharing in worship, which is why we have worship associates. And one of the things I really enjoy is hearing the voices not just of myself or staff, but hearing your voices as well. And so we have now our worship associate for this morning, John Murphy.
Thank you, Reverend Joel. So when I saw that Reverend Joel was going to talk about conflict, I decided to take a look at the thesaurus and see what came up. And I found words you might expect: battle, fight, war, dispute, controversy. Words we might actually use to describe the current political situation in our country today. However, I also found terms such as encounter, engagement, disagreement, opposition, argument, words that might make us envision productive debates between folks with different ideas on a given subject. The all-foreign phrase comes to mind for me, how to disagree without being disagreeable. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about a fight. I don't know if any of you kids have gotten into fights before, arguments. Those who know me, I think, would find it hard to believe that I would get into an argument. Ha, 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 ha. But it actually happened to me this last week. And it was in connection with, you know that I volunteer with Habitat for Humanity. I'm a member of a group of folks that are regular volunteers that are tigers. And one thing we do is we mark lumber so that inexperienced volunteers can put the pieces together to make walls. And that's a very involved and intricate process. It takes a lot of concentration and there's a lot of room for errors. So Joe and I'll call him Joe, we're talking about ways that we might avoid those errors. And it turned out that we were in sharp disagreement about how to reduce the errors. You know, he had one idea and I had another, and it just got escalated. And without having some of you up here and enacting it, it'd be impossible for me to show you how heated it got. It did get pretty heated. And it seemed that there was a lot of emotional content associated with what we were trying to say. And when we finally realized that, we kind of calmed down and we started talking about ways to achieve what we were after. We were after eliminating errors or improving the process, achieving better quality. And you know what? When we actually talked and listened to one another, finally, it turned out that we came up with something that neither one of us had actually thought of, and it will improve the process. It'll actually solve the problem. So it did result, the controversy did result in a good outcome. All Souls here has seen conflict, both large and small, and past and present, actually. And at first glance, it might appear that some of these arguments about relatively small, trivial matters. In my experience, disagreements about even small, seemingly minor issues have often stemmed from deeply held and emotionally charged value systems. In spite of all of this, I think we have some tools that enable us to work through the inevitable conflicts. For example, on the wall behind me here, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and of course, respect for the dignity and worth of everyone. I believe these and other touchstones provide valuable guidance when disagreements arise. Now, I'm not going to insult your intelligence by claiming that, you know, all conflicts are easily resolved. But I will say, I'm going to assert that sometimes after the dust settles, better solutions are found after a thorough vetting of competing viewpoints. And as it turned out with Habitat for Humanity, that certainly happened in that kerfuffle with Joe and I at Habitat for Humanity.
Re-90. I know this rose will open. Sometimes I think it's really nice to have something to sing when you're in a situation. And this is a pretty good one, I've found, for me, if I'm going to be talking with somebody. What number was it again?
396.
19. 396. 396. Yeah, I just turned my hearing aid up a little bit, so. I know this rose will open. It's 396. And, you know, the choir is here today and a little warmed up. You think we could do it as a round?
Sure. Let's do one side and then the other side.
Yeah, all right. So if you're on this side, you can watch Greg for when to start, and I'll lead this side.
Why don't we do it once, everybody, and then do the round?
Yeah, let's do it together. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. Know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul. I know this rose will open. We'll practice that again. Sometimes it takes a while to get back into that. Yesterday, Earth Day. I know in Unitarian Universalist congregations we have been marking or celebrating Earth Day now since the beginning, since Earth Day was first proposed in 1968. And in this time of joys and sorrows, beginning by the joy and gratitude for this earth, for this world and the life in it which sustains us, certainly worthy of our attention, as well as our sorrows for that life which struggles even to exist as a result of our own human activity in the world. It's been a season of holy days. So the last 10 nights of Ramadan have begun, and Elizabeth tells me that's an especially important part of that month of celebration and of ritual. Passover ended yesterday, another wonderful ritual from the Jewish tradition. And today is Easter for Orthodox Christians. So for those who might be listening or have some connection to Orthodox Christianity, happy Easter. An interesting story that I've been following. Melissa Lucio, she's a mother in Texas. And the police were called some years ago to her home. One of her children had died. And Melissa Lucio was on the floor just speechless, unable to move, unable to do anything. And as I've read the story, it's interesting that they decided then and there that the reason her little girl died was because of her, because she was not crying, apparently. And they took it to court, and she was convicted for the child's death, although there's actually no evidence for that. And across the political spectrum, all the way from right to left, there's a movement to have the governor of Texas set aside her conviction and her, apparently, she's slated to be executed. We always have sorrows for losses for terrible losses, for injustices. And I think in this particular situation, especially this morning, had the justice system been used the way it intended, very much in some ways like this covenant, to approach the exercise of the law because of our love for one another, to serve, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom. If all of that had been followed, rather than assuming anything about this mother, perhaps learning about why such grief for her might have put her into an almost catatonic state. And this time of joys and sorrows, may we always hold within us a flame that keeps our hearts and minds open to the stories and to the lives of others, to the stories and the joys of the entire world around us on this Earth Day. Spirit of life, in the sounds of this room, the moving air, the rustling of orders of service in our neighbors' hands, the sounds of our children as they worship with us, the sound of the wind and the world outside going by. May we always have the courage to keep our hearts and minds open to one another, to know the effect of our own lives and the mysteries of the lives of others. And that great mystery that in the connection between us, something happens, something greater, something that calls us to more life. May that light shine in us. And when we've lost the light or it goes out, may we remember to look to one another, to have it rekindled. For these joys and sorrows and all the joys and sorrows that are here because we are human and alive, we're grateful for this gathering and for the life we share. Amen. So be it. Blessed be.
Good morning again. We have a reading this morning titled Simple Song by Marge Piercy. When we are going towards someone, we say, "You are just like me. Your thoughts are my brothers. Word matches word. How easy to be together." When we are leaving someone, we say, "How strange you are. We cannot communicate. We can never agree. How hard and weary to be together." We are not different, nor alike, but each strange in his leather body, sealed in skin and reaching out clumsy hands. And loving is an act that cannot outlive the open hand, the open eye, the door in the chest, standing open.
This morning, we're going to share the offering with our East Coast Migrant Head Start program that's to be housed in our RE wing, this very church. With this project, the children of migrant and seasonal farm workers will be cared for and advocated in a culturally sensitive way, along with their parents, who matter the most to these children. Your contributions today will help supply toys and educational supplies that will help the children receive high-quality education to support school readiness. So contribute. You can put cash or check into the collection plate, or if online, you'll find a link that says Give to All Souls here. I think it's near the description for today's service. And be sure to indicate that your donation is to be split with Head Start, East Coast Head Start Project, or just say Head Start, that'll work. Thank you for your generosity in supporting All Souls and for supporting the East Coast Head Start Project. May we now accept our morning offering.
What's the trumpeter's name who sang that?
Louis Armstrong.
Oh, look, how could I forget? I was hearing his voice as you were playing it. What a wonderful world. I think congregations are amazing, especially Unitarian Universalist congregations, because there's no assumption on our part that we should be here, that there's some sort of eternal rule that's been proclaimed and stamped upon the face of the earth that says there shall be Unitarian Universalist congregations in this world. There's no such thing other than just the longings of our lives, the hopes and dreams we bring defined with one another. I just think it's amazing. And you know, I have to tell you, one of the reasons that I love interim ministry is because it is so immediate. Getting to know everybody, getting to know you, finding out what's going on in the life of a congregation. Congregations, I've also realized, are very vulnerable. I didn't start out as an interim minister. I started out, actually, the first 2 congregations I served, I was just so excited and passionate about Unitarian Universalism. And then I served a congregation as a senior minister for about 11 years. And when it was time to leave there, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. It was kind of out of the cycle a little bit when I realized it was time for me to move on. And so I talked to a friend in our national headquarters and said, I'm leaving this congregation, but I'm not sure what's next. And my colleague said, would you be an interim minister? And she's pretty high up, so she knew what was going on and was actually making an offer in some ways, or at least a suggestion. And I said, well, I would, but I'm not one of those interims that comes in and says, here's what's wrong with you and here's what I think you need to do, which happened sometimes. And she said, well, that's good, because we don't want that. I said, oh, okay, so I'm interested. It seemed like it'd be a good interim experience. For me to be an interim would be a good interim experience for me to have just in my own career. I had no idea that I'd end up loving interim ministry because of the immediacy of it and because of the amazing people I get to know. And actually, John was asking me this morning about, well, when do you know where you're going to go next? And I said, well, I'll know on May 18th, after there's a search process that's beginning just about now and lasts about 2.5 weeks. And on the 18th, I'll know where I'm moving, and I start packing up and getting ready to go. Don't say goodbye to me yet, though. I'm here through June, so still your minister. John asked me, what do you look for in a congregation? And it's an important question, because I look for a congregation in which the people listen to one another and in which they listen to their congregation. They're open to one another, like in that poem that Elizabeth, our intern minister, just read now, just moments ago. Understanding that it's only human of us to think that, oh my gosh, we have some difference, we must not like each other. Oh, we're getting along and things must be great. Conflict is always there in congregational life. And there's congregations that are willing to listen even with the conflict. I find that so interesting. There was one congregation, a friend of mine called and said, hey, this one congregation's open, are you interested? And having spoken at the congregation before and knowing the minister that's leaving, one of the things I know about them is about happy with in the inherent worth and I may have mentioned on the 10th a little bit about a practice that you can follow. And this, I'm going to expound on that just a little more before I talk about what happens after these 4 steps. The 4 steps to good communication in congregational life. And actually, I heard these 4 steps from John Behrens. He was the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, our national association, in the 1990s. And he was, as he was to so many younger ministers. So you're having a disagreement with your friend in the congregation who's telling you their frustration, their love is the spirit of this church, the 10th, or they're complaining about another congregant or what their frustration is, maybe it's a little intimidating to go meet with the person with the conflict or the concern says no. This is the hard part. Step 4, ask them to keep it to themselves. Sense that someone's unhappy with you, you have no idea what it is, and it feels like you're getting nibbled on from behind by a duck or something constantly. But you don't know what it is. And actually, it happens to all of us. It's not just ministers. It happens to your board. It happens to any of us when we come to church. Keep connected. Talk to each other. Talk to us. We'll actually understand, oh yeah, okay, if it's not that important, I can just keep it to myself. I don't have to keep worrying it, keep going on with it. And in congregational life, sometimes there are folks who are just struggling to work things out. Sometimes there are folks who kind of enjoy the negative attention they get by never talking to the person they should talk to, but talking to anybody else. And that's usually when your minister and your leadership have a conversation with them and say, no, actually you have to talk directly to somebody, or you do have to keep it to yourself. So that's that 4 steps. That's a 4-step process for dealing with an initial way of dealing with conflict in congregational life. Listen well and listen with loving ears. Then ask one another to reconnect. And if you can't, if something's just not connectable, then keep it to yourself. Don't spread the conflict outside of where it belongs. But as I give you that advice, I was going to do a whole sermon, I realized, on triangulation. If you know anything about family systems, we're talking about triangulation, unhealthy triangulation. But actually, you can read about that. There's something in addition to this that you have to have as a people, as a congregation. And I found it up again, actually, as I was thinking about it in your covenant. Do you remember that old, you might remember the name of this show, Henry Hampton, who was actually a Unitarian Universalist, did it on the civil rights movement, Keep Your Eyes on the Prize. There's a hymn, a gospel hymn, keep your eye on the prize, hang on, hang on. And you know, that's one of the things I love about being an interim minister, is that to come into a congregation and listen and find out, what do you love? What are you excited about? What draws this miraculous community together? Because there's no one who ordains that you must exist other than your love for life and the friends you make and for the future of people here with us and people yet to be born. there's this need to love, but there's also the need to seek. And that's what the abbot was doing in this story, was being curious. Maybe the rabbi knows something about why we're struggling. Something that the police officers and the DA in Texas should have done, which was be curious about what had happened to this family. And in fact, that's what Professor Bumbaugh was getting at. So Professor Bumbaugh comes, he's a humanist. I grew up a humanist. I loved, it was such an important experience for me. And I loved going to Sunday school and learning the scientific method in Sunday school, because we weren't going to get it in school, the public school. It made the school board nervous in those days. Oh, they might talk about evolution. Well, we got it at church for sure. The thing that I learned, though, in Sunday school also was the scientific method it's a methodology of doubt. It's always doubting, always seeking the flaw in the theory that we have so we can create a better theory, which is very cool. That's all about seeking. It's also problem-focused. It's kind of like that interim ministry where the interim minister comes in and says, you have a problem, we're going to fix your problem. And you know what? Congregations don't need that. Curiosity and love. Congregations need curiosity and love. And I think that's what Professor Bumbaugh was getting at. He wrote, when he spoke at General Assembly, he was talking about his language of reverence, and he explained that so much of religion now is part of the entertainment industry. And in the process, religion has been stripped of its power to stand in opposition to a world that is filled with injustice. So instead of religious communities standing in judgment on secular political power, religion has become a tool of political power. A tool of political power. And so Professor Bumbaugh called for us to create a new language of reverence. The old language, he explained, has been captured and enslaved. What are the words that we will say to one another that free us? To seek, and understanding that to seek is to be curious and to have an open heart with love. That's why I came to love interim ministry so much. That's why we did that open questions process in those workshops some weeks ago. I wanted to hear what excites you. And so many fascinating things are exciting you. What things get in the way? You knew perfectly well what kinds of things get in the way. I've never really had to tell you. Science is predictive. It uses a process of doubt. It's kind of a negative process, one with a really strong outcome. To use a similar process, not necessarily on doubt, but a same kind of openness, one that's an openness of the heart, is to shift. For me, what it has been is a shift of my humanism, a shift from one based on doubt to a humanism based on the spirit of love, to seek the truth in love. And that's the line that I saw this week, that I thought about this week, that is so powerful for you as a congregation. You have this very strong humanist heritage, and that doesn't mean you might not, it doesn't mean you don't have people of all kinds of other faiths, all the way from Muslim, Christian, Jewish, pagan, folks who don't know and really aren't so interested in finding labels, and all All of that here and so beautiful and so welcome. But what you do together matters a great deal. Having high expectations of one another is important. And when it comes to conflict, to seek the truth in love, but to do it in love, that's the subtle and essential shift in the way we celebrate our humanist heritage. And that's what Professor Bumbaugh was talking about. To have that open heart to one another. Having realized you've gone to a friend and the friend has said, well, you have a complaint with the board, take it to the board now. And knowing that you love your people so much that you will go and meet with the board, even though it's scary to do. But to go with it in love and to be curious about what the board will say. To listen to a friend with curiosity and love and hear the fullness of their story. And even though their beliefs are so utterly different than yours, find your life still transformed. You still believe the same thing, perhaps, and yet everything's changed. The rabbi's gift was a question that opened the heart of the monks. And the answer became an answer that they lived out with one another. A question that inspired them into what that line in your covenant says, to seek the truth in love. If you wish to have useful conflict, I urge you to turn to that line in your covenant. You'll find it useful. We have a hymn again. 318. 318. He gave me the... Yeah. This worship, this word worship, from an ancient word, English word meaning worth noticing. You are worth noticing. And the love you have for each other, for your youth and your children, and for the people who have yet to come to you. So beautiful, so amazing, so worthy of notice. This service of worship comes to an end. But let your love, your worship of life, your seeking, let it always carry on and continue. And when it becomes hard, remember, you have friends here. We'll be together again. Go in peace. Be in peace.